Hi everyone, Chris here. A little bit about our trip around the east coast of Scotland. So we'd spent a couple of days in Edinburgh and Paul would do a bit of work and I saw my family, and we decided we'd go off to the Isle of May, which is in the Firth of Forth, and anchor off. It's a bird sanctuary and it's a really nice kind of place. Isle of May. So we're hoping that this foghorn doesn't go off in the middle of the night. But what a great sunset. This was where we had our first big problem of the trip. The running aground in Edinburgh the week before wasn't a big problem because we could have, we'd have been stuck there for an hour or so and maybe 2 hours, and that would have been okay, no problem. But this was our first big problem of the trip. So we went round the back of the Isle of May, so we were on the east coast of it, and there was an anchorage there, and we anchored off, and it was a nice anchorage. And there was lots of wildlife to look at, lots of birds and seals and things like this, and it was really quite nice. When we arrived, we saw that there were fishing buoys, pot markers there, and we anchored well away, or at least we thought we'd anchored well away from them. And of course the point of the story is we weren't well away from them. Anyway, what happened in the middle of the night, we started getting really thrown around in the boat. I mean, we couldn't quite work out why, because the weather wasn't bad. And okay, the tide had turned, but we hadn't really seen any reason to why we were getting thrown around a lot. Anyway, we decided to tough it out. And then, of course, we wake up in the morning and being wary of the pots, we had actually thought, are there any pots here? Are there any lines in the water? And we looked over the side, no lines in the water. And of course the reason we couldn't see any lines in the water was because one of these pot markers had actually wrapped itself well and truly around the prop and underneath the boat. So when Superman here decided to start the motor, engine started, put it in gear, instantly stopped, obviously tied onto it. That's only the first part of the problem. We then obviously had to cut the thing off, and Paul got into his wetsuit and got the ceramic knife, which we had specially for the purpose of cutting off pot markers. So he went over the side with the knife and it broke almost immediately, so we didn't have a decent sharp knife, and that was not much fun. The complication here was we were sufficiently close to the shore that we couldn't try and sail off this or do anything else. We had to put the anchor back down and just wait there. Anyway, Paul spent ages and ages unwrapping the buoy from around the prop. The rope cutter hadn't done anything to the rope there. We eventually got it off to the point where we could at least have a long enough piece of rope to cut, and we got the bread knife out, and Paul cut the buoy off. Now, because we're good citizens, we decided that we didn't want to do unto the fisherman that had left the buoy, so we had a ratty old fender which we duly tied onto the rope down to his pots, or her pots. Anyway, we let go of that buoy and it shot off into the distance. Now we assumed that what had happened was the knot had come undone and it had simply gone to the rope had gone to the bottom of the sea. But actually what had happened was that the person had put in a very, very long scope. The fender stopped about 200 yards away from us. So what had happened was this massively long pot buoy rope had gone round the boat and tied itself around the rudder and the prop shafts.
day off we went after Peterhead to Whitehills, which is one of the few places we could get into on the Moray Firth, and it was quite an interesting place to go to. We'd rung ahead first of all just to check we could get in, but we had this really interesting entry because as you approach it, it doesn't look like there's anywhere to go. It looks like you're just going to smash into the building at the end, and it's only at the very, very, very last minute that it's obvious that you can turn left to go into the very small harbour. It's a very small little place, and as you can see, it's quite interesting. And the harbour master was waiting for us here. He'd been tracking us on the AIS and knew we were coming and was very, very helpful. So really rather good. Whitehills was a really nice little place and enjoyed ourselves there, and we carried on next day to head to Lossiemouth, which is also one of the few places we could stop. I'll say a little bit more about that later on. It was quite windy, but not unbelievably so, and it was along this point when we had what could have been a very, very serious problem. One of the jib cars, or Genoa cars, broke, and the little wheel that's there, which was actually quite substantial, it's about a couple of inches big, broke off and flung itself over into the sea. Now, it was really lucky that nobody was standing there at the time, because if anybody had been anywhere near that when it had let go, it could have been quite a serious injury. So a bit of a lucky escape there. Right, the last leg of this particular episode is the one from Lossiemouth to Inverness, and as you can see from the track here, the zigzagging, we were beating into the wind for the best part of 12 hours here. We had to do a fair bit of motor sailing towards the end of it just to make any progress against an adverse tide, so it was all in all a long slog, and as you can see, the weather wasn't that brilliant either. But we did get into the Narrows just before the marina at Inverness, which is just coming up now, and as you can see, we've got rain on the screen now. It's rather a miserable day, and this was compounded when we got into the marina and we had to move berth, and then when we did move berth, we ended up finding out that the boat wouldn't come out of reverse gear, so we thumped into the pontoon. It didn't cause any damage, but that was the first of our negative experiences with the gearbox on this trip. So looking back on it, quite a lot happened in this leg, and we picked up a buoy, we've had a jib car go, we've managed to have the gearbox break down on us. We were kind of fingers crossed that when we went through the canal we might have a little bit more luck, and that's what we'll do next time when we're joined by some guests.